So to summarize, class is like a container, but it is a closed one. Okay, it needs a reference to access. Directly, you can't access a class. So that reference we are creating here in the form of object. So you can have any number of references. So if I consider Infosys as a class, all the employees of Infosys are its objects. So when I say we are objects of Infosys, that means we have access to all the uh, facilities provided by Infosys, except few. There are restrictions, obviously, like we can't enter few restricted areas, we can't have access to few stuff. Okay, but there are common areas which we can access. Anyone who is not employee of Infosys, they cannot access Infosys as a class. Okay, so they need, without reference, a class cannot be accessed. So this is one of the way where we are initializing the attributes of a class. We can also initialize using the constructor. Okay. I'm sharing this code in the chat window. If you are interested, you can take a copy of this. First is your employee. Second, I have shared the tester. Now let us modify this. So basically, getters and setters are not meant for initialization of attributes in the first place. They are actually used to update the attributes of a class. If we want to initialize the attributes of a class, we need to go with the constructor. So constructor is a special method of a class that gets called automatically whenever a new object is created. Okay, automatically it gets called. So it gets auto-triggered automatically whenever a new object is created for the class. And the name of the constructor, why it is special? Because name of the constructor method should be same as the class name, exactly same as the class name. So this is a default constructor. Default constructor is something where we don't pass any parameters, okay, which is where the parenthesis is empty. Then, so this default constructor cannot be used for initialization. If you use it, it will be a hard-coded value. So we go with a parameterized one where we provide parameters. So parameter name, we keep it same, employee ID and string name. So this dot empid is equals to empid and this dot name is equals to name. How many of you have already implemented this code, which you are able to see on your screen? I mean, how many of you are already familiar? You can just say +1 in the chat window. How many of you are already familiar with this? Okay, getting the responses. This is only for my understanding, how much detailing I should go, how much in depth I should go. Okay, that's great. So that means it is going to be a revision for those who already know this. So basically what we are discussing right now is expected from you, and this was not part of the session. I only insisted that before we go ahead with Spring Boot, let us touch upon the basics first. Otherwise, it will be a bouncer. It will be difficult. So I only insisted to have this 2 to 3 days of sessions on the basic topics. And there are some other advanced topic also that you should know, like streams, Lambda, functional interfaces, JDBC APIs, okay, connection, all those stuff. So here, this is a keyword in Java, and it refers to the current object. So why here the usage of this is important? Because left-hand side also, the name of the ID is employee ID, right-hand side also, it is exactly the same. So to differentiate, the instance variable with the local variable, we have to use this. So left-hand side that you see is the instance variable. It refers to the one declared at line number 5 and 6. Whereas on the right-hand side, these are local variables which are declared as a parameter inside this constructor. Now you might say that we could have made this names different. Why we are using the same name as the instance variable name? Because this is the naming convention. The local variable name should match with the name of the attribute. So just to keep uniformity. So this is the good practice that we follow. Otherwise, we could have different name also. But the problem is, it would be very difficult to identify the what kind of values you're going to store. That's why we keep the name same. Yes, correct, Professor Gra. So it is to differentiate the instance variable with the local variable. So if I will say here there are 4 variables, out of which 2 of them are instance variables declared at line number 5 and 6, and 2 are local variables which are declared inside the constructor function. So the value for these local variables will be passed from the main method, and these values will be assigned on the left hand side to the instance variable. So here we are differentiating local variable, which is on the right hand side, with the instance variable that is on the left hand side. So this is how we initialize values using a constructor in Java. So that means what change we need to do at the inside the main method. So inside the main method, instead of calling the set methods, I will call the constructor itself. So while creating the object, so how the constructor is called? Parameterized constructor. The parameterized constructor will be called whenever you are creating the object. So there is no separate call for it. Okay. So here I will pass the attributes. Now, if you see, there is no need of using setter methods. Similarly, I will remove this setter method invocation and pass the values directly. This also gives me the same output. There is no change in the output, but the way we are writing the code is different now. We are initializing by calling the constructor. That means whenever line number 5 executes, this object gets created first. Okay, so whenever the object is created, the control goes to the constructor at line number 11. It receives 101 as EMP ID and Jack as name, and initializes both the instance variable with the received values. Control goes back to the object, which gets created finally in the memory, and the reference of which is assigned to E1, okay, which is of type employee. So using that reference, we are just fetching the values 101 and Jack. Similarly, line number 10, this statement gets executed first, where it will pass 102 and Joe as values for EMP ID and name. The instance variables gets initialized to the received values. Control goes back to the object and it creates the object in the memory, and the reference to this object is passed as E2. That means E2 has access to this object. So using that, we are again fetching the ID and name, which is 102 and Joe. So this is how it works. So this is how we make use of constructor, okay, for initialization of the attributes. So this default constructor that you see at line number 8 is never called. So how to call this default constructor? Just create the object. So when line number 15 gets executed, it calls the default constructor. So how it identifies which constructor to call depending on the parameter if you are passing. If you are passing parameters, that means it based on the signature, it goes to the parameterized constructor. When you are not passing anything while creating the object, it understands based on the signature that this is the constructor that needs to be called. Unlike other methods like get employee ID, get employee name, we need a reference to call them. Means we need to explicitly call them. Okay, this is not the case with constructor. It's like some people, in order to wake up in the morning, they need alarm. Okay, so this method is like that. Okay, they need an explicit call, right? And sometimes somebody at home has to be violent with them so that they get up in the morning. They don't wake up even after alarm also. And there are people who will wake up without any alarm. So constructor is like that. Okay, so there is no explicit invocation. Okay, just whenever the object is created, okay, automatically it goes to the constructor and executes it. So it does not need any explicit call. Yes, you can say unparameterized constructor. Please let me know in case you have any queries here. So if I ask you how many objects and how many reference variables are there in this code, what would be your answer? You can respond through chat window. How many objects and how many reference variables are there in this code? Great, I'm getting the answers. So there are different answers here. If you can correctly identify how many objects and how many reference variables are available, you have got 100% clarity on objects and references. Many of you are giving the right answers. I will wait for few more responses. Meanwhile, I will give you a hint. Where line number 5, if you see, the entire statement is not an object. Part of this statement is an object and part of this is a reference. So entire statement is not an object. This is how we create an object. Okay, this is the syntax, how we create an object. So the correct answer is there are 3 objects and there are 2 references. How 3 objects? First object is at line number 5. We created second object as line number 10 and the third object at line number 15. Okay. How many references? 2 references, E1 and E2. Okay, E1 and E2, there are 2 references and 3 objects. So what will happen to this statement? This statement, here the object is created, but we are not assigning the address of this object to any reference. We are not assigning it. It's like a new 3 BHK flat is constructed and is ready, but there is no owner as of now. Okay, who can refer or access the 3 BHK flat? It is ready, but it is closed. Nobody is using as of now. If you wanted to assign it to somebody, you just create a reference, right? And assign it. Now E3 owns this object. That means now there is someone who is pointing to this object. So this is how it goes. Now, in this code, there is still some fine tuning that is required. If you um, see each time whenever a new student joins college, are we manually assigning the student ID to them? or there is some system in place, or any employee who joins Infosys, is it like HR assigns the uh, employee ID randomly, manually, or there is system in place? How it should happen? Yeah, Professor Vedehi says it should be automatically generated. Absolutely right. See, names cannot be auto-generated, right? Because everybody comes with a name, address, contact number. So we cannot auto-generate. But the student ID or the employee ID is something which we assigns to someone who is new. So it has to be automatically generated. That way, we can maintain uniqueness. Otherwise, you have to keep a track of what was the last student ID that was assigned and who has assigned it. There will be multiple people, and there are chances that two students are allocated with the same student ID if it is manual. So it has to be automated, right? It has to be automated. So how do we change or modify our code here so that it automatically generates? Can we, uh, first thing that might come in your mind is we can have a variable, integer variable, and increment that variable inside the constructor. That way, each time the object is created, we know constructor will be called and it will auto increment the value. Shall we proceed with this approach? Create a sequence in the table. Yeah, we can do that also, but since we don't have database concept here, we have to do it at the application level. How do we do in here in this code? Yes, we can take a static variable, right? So static variable is where we can make use of, because static variable is something that belongs to the class, right? So that is where static variable comes into picture. So what is the purpose of static variable? Or static variable helps us in auto generation logic. So when we say auto generation logic, it can be auto generation of student ID, auto generation of ticket ID, okay, or any ID or anything that needs to be automated or automatically generated. Because when we declare a static variable, it belongs to the class, so it can keep track of what was the last updated value. So that way we can make use of it. Just to keep the code clean and simple, I removed something with a few code which is not required. You know the concept, right? When we define a parameterized constructor, then default constructor is not provided by default, right? If you are providing a parameterized constructor, then there is no default constructor present inside the class. We need to explicitly create it if you want to use. Okay. If there are no parameterized constructor, then default constructor will be available inside the class. We don't have to explicitly create. Explicitly creation of a default constructor is required in case you have already defined a parameterized constructor. So parameterized constructor is like when suppose a principal enters the college or a particular section, students will run away, right? So those students are like your constructor. So the constructor goes away from the class whenever the parameterized constructor is defined explicitly. If there is no parameterized, then constructor will be available inside the class. So in case you want to make use of default constructor, we have to explicitly define it in case there are a parameterized constructor present. So right now it is not required, so I'm not defining it. Only one line instance. If object name is omitted, further lines are not available for that object. Uh, Professor Satyam, can you elaborate your question? Not able to understand what exactly you're trying to ask. If you want, you can unmute and ask your question. Okay, meanwhile, he is back. We'll continue with the static one. So first of all, how do we create a static variable? So we have a keyword called static, using which we can create a static variable. Just one keyword will make the variable belonging to class. So I will create private static. Static is a keyword in Java to declare a static variable, integer counter. So how static variable is different? Static variable belongs to the class. Okay. So counter is a static variable, whereas name and employee ID, they are instance variable. They belongs to the object of the class. Okay. So that's why if you see the instance variable, each instance variable, each object has its own copy of instance variable. So if you see the object pointed to by the reference E1, it has its own uh, copy of employee ID and name. If you see another object, it has its own employee ID, employee name. Okay, so it is non-shareable. Whereas static variable can be accessed by all the objects. Means it is common across all the objects. So static variable is like it's like a cafeteria in a premise which is accessible by all. Okay, so that is what static variable is. So now how do we make use of this static variable to auto generate employee ID? So what we'll do inside the constructor where we are initializing employee ID and name. So this employee ID, instead of taking it from the calling environment, okay, now the calling environment will not pass employee ID. It will be auto-created. Only name will be passed as a parameter. Only name will be passed as a parameter. So what we have to do, we'll go back here and instead of assigning as EMP ID, I will assign counter, which is a static variable. Now, what is the value of this counter? We have to give an initial value so that it can start from some point. Let's say the initial value of static variable is 101. This is one of the way to declare static variable. We can make use of static block also, which is a good practice to initialize a static variable. Now, this will do the job, okay? But the best way to access a static variable is using the class name. Okay, always access a static variable using class name. Although Java does not show any error, even if you don't use a class name, but it's a good practice. But in case you're using Python, it has a strict check. If you're not using a static variable using a class name, if you're not accessing static variable using a class name, it shows compilation error. But in Java, it will work. But the best practices is always access the static variable in a static way. And the static way is always refer a static variable using the class name, which is employee. So we just need to update this employee dot counter plus plus. That's it. Now each time an object is created, you can give a different sequence also. Let's say 1000001. It will start from this sequence. So the first value of employee ID is going to be 10001. Next 0002, because each time this constructor will be called, after assigning the value of static variable, it increments the counter. So this is important. We need to increment. So if I execute this code, the ID is auto-generated. We are only passing the name as a parameter. So this is how we make use of static variable. So we cannot make use of instance variable for this task, because instance variable, each time you create an object, it gets initialized to its default value. So it is not able to retain the last value that you have updated. Because as we discussed, each object will have its own copy of instance variable. So it gets initialized to default value. So these kind of tasks cannot be achieved using instance variable. That's where static variables comes into picture. This is the only reason why we make use of static variable for auto generation logic. Okay, Professor Satyam says in previous example, object name omitted, but compiler will create object. That created object available only one line instance. That object destroyed after that line, I think. See, in the previous example, we had the default constructor here. Okay, default constructor here, and we were calling that default constructor with this new employee invocation. But now, since we don't have a default constructor, this line shows an error. Because whenever parameterized constructor is defined, default constructor is not available. Okay, so if you want to access default constructor, you need to first define default constructor inside your class. Otherwise, this statement will not work. So that was the previous code that we wrote. Any questions here? Please do let me know. We just understood the usage of static variable. And you are going to use this static variable going forward. These demos are available as part of the course as well. So if you go to the module, we started from here. Although the course starts with the very basics, there is a introductory video also based on what we are going to cover. It starts with the very basics. What is Java architecture that you might have already taught in college? Okay, how JVM works, what are JDK and all those, the very basic concepts, how execution happens, the features of Java. You can always go through and self-learn all this in case you have missed it out. Introduction to shell, you can, because we have to start with this for a new batch, because although they say we have executed Java code, but actually they don't know the very basics. Okay. Then it starts followed by keywords, data types, operators. Okay. Same, plus, minus, multiplication, division, all those. And then your OP starts from this module. Methods, okay, introduction to methods, then method definition. It goes with object creation. You can see the code here. This is where you can copy this code. Okay, I had used the example of using employee. Here it is creating a customer class. Customer name is the instance variable, and get methods for get and set method for customer. So this code is also available. And you have a code in tryout also. So don't worry about the code. Can constructor be static in Java? No, professor. Static can only be public. Sorry, constructor can only be public. It cannot be static. Static is a keyword that you use with a variable or a method. We can create a static method, we can create a static variable. How to access the material link is already shared with you. You might have received the session invite mail by Girija. So in that mail, all the links are available. So these courses are available on Springboard. In case you have not registered, you just first register on the Springboard and you will find all the materials there. Link is available in the invite mail that you might have received. So all these courses are on Infosys Springboard. Okay, so static keyword is used with variables and methods. Okay, if you're using static with methods, that means you can call the methods directly using class name. Static methods are useful. Static methods are useful in case where there is a restriction on the object creation of a class. Okay. So in that case, if we know the class name, we can directly access the static variables from that class. Also, the requirement is just to fetch a single method from a class. So there is no need to create the entire object, because object creation for the class is done, initialization of the attributes or update is also done. So we just need to access one method from the class. So just make it as static so that we can call that method directly using class name. So there is no need of creating any object. So this is how a class diagram is represented. It has three compartments. First compartment will have the name of the class, which is customer here. Second compartment will have all the attribute details, including the static methods. So plus denotes public, minus denotes private, and hash symbol denotes protected. So the third one will have details. The third compartment will have details about the constructors and the methods of the class. So this is how the class diagram is represented. So anybody wants to have the design of the class, this is how we create. And from this design, we have to create the class. And there is a plugin for Eclipse using which we can generate a class diagram from the code also. Okay, right now I don't have plugin installed. So that generates a class diagram through Eclipse directly based on whatever code you have written. But right hand side, if you see the outline, it gives me the complete details of the attributes and the methods. So you see the red ones, they are private. Green circles, they are public. Wherever you see red square bracket, red squares, they represents private, and we have created instance variables as private. So this is how we implement encapsulation, by making or keeping the attributes private, and so that direct access to these attributes is not possible. Only indirect access is possible through the public getters and setter methods outside the class. That's the whole concept of encapsulation. So shall I proceed if there are no further queries? Okay, I will share the code in the chat window also. So I have shared the employee class, then I'm sharing the class with the main method. You can create the packaging at the same way or structure the same way that I had created. That way there will not be any confusion. Inside demo.oop package, I had created two .java files, one with employee and another with tester.java. Tester is the class from where all the object creation and invocation is happening. Employee.java is the implementing class where we have implemented the employee class. Okay, so next we'll understand. Shall I proceed with the inheritance? If you are comfortable with inheritance, we can skip that. I will go ahead with aggregation. Aggregation is important. So, Professor, shall I go ahead with inheritance or aggregation next? Am I audible? There is no response in the chat window. Okay. Okay, I will quickly go with the inheritance part in case if you have done it long time ago, it will be a recap for you. So here we quickly create a class customer. With private customer ID, private string name. We can have more attributes, but I am going ahead with only these two. I'll quickly create a constructor. So this is the constructor parameterized one for the class. I will also need getters and setters. So this class is ready. Now we will create a static variable counter, and this is how the static block is created, which is used to initialize the static variable. In the previous example, we have seen that we have initialized the static variable directly wherever we had created. That is also possible, but the best practice is always use a static block. And static block is somewhere equivalent to the constructor because static block also does not need any explicit call. The difference is static block is created at the time of creation of a class. Whenever the class is loaded in the memory, static block is also invoked. Another difference is static block gets invoked even before the constructor is called. Okay, so if you have static block and constructor, static block is going to execute first, then the constructor. So static block should only be used for initializing the static variable. It should not be used for any other purpose. Okay, it is only that is the only task that has to be done inside a static block. And then we can assign this counter to this customer ID, and like how we did earlier, we will increment so that it gets updated to the next value. So this is done. Now, so customer, now we cannot say in inheritance, when you just create a class, you cannot say this is a parent class or child class until and unless there is no relationship between other classes, right? So this is just a class that we had created. Now here, I will create another class. I'm using the same .java file. Let's say regular customer. And in order to make regular customer the child class of customer, I just need to use the extends keyword followed by the name of the class that you want to make as a parent. Okay, so customer is going to be the parent now. How customer becomes parent? Because somebody else is extending customer. So regular customer is another class which is extending customer. So automatically customer becomes a parent class and regular customer becomes its child. So what we do in parent and child? So in parent class, all the common attributes across all the child classes must be defined. All the common attributes, behaviors across the classes should be present inside the customer, whereas the child class will have its specific attributes, right? So if we say that the definition of inheritance, so you can use the chat window to share your definition of inheritance or parent class, child class. So we have one point here, acquiring the properties of base class to derived class is inheritance. Absolutely right. Like how inheritance happens in real time. So whatever a parent has accumulated, the wealth, property, the children's will inherit, provided the parents has accumulated some property. Otherwise, the child has to take care of its own. Acquiring properties from existing class to new class is inheritance, correct? So what we achieve with inheritance? Why do we do inheritance in the first place?
In order to avoid rewriting of the properties which are common in both the classes.
Absolutely right. So that means reusability of code. Yes, correct. So that we can make our code reusable. So there will be multiple child classes, right? And multiple child classes must be implementing some common behaviors. For example, in a college, so there is a salary calculation that happens, but the calculation of salary is not uniform across uh, all the members of the college. Okay, for senior professors it is different, for junior it is different, for principal it is different, the support staff of college, their salary component is different, right? uh, and there might be some other category, their salary component is different. So the common behavior is calculation of salary, but the calculation of salary is not same for all the different category of people who are working for the college, right? So that means the behavior is common, but how the behavior is going to implement depends or varies from category to category. So that way we define the common behavior inside the parent class and let the child class provide their own implementation for that behavior. So we keep a common behavior, okay, so that the protocol remains the same. The components can be added what is additional, but the basic components like basic pay, HRA, or any components which are common will be provided by the parent class. Okay, so that way the code becomes reusable. Also, there might be some basic calculations that might be required by the child class, like tax calculation, because tax is same for all, right? A tax percentage will be same for all the categories. So instead of doing that calculation by each and every child class, why not define inside the parent and just call that method and just implement what is additional or specific to that class. So reusability is the main reason why we go with inheritance. So here, extends is the keyword that is used to inherit another class in Java. So inside this, let's say regular customer has some additional attribute. So customer ID, name, and let's say uh, customer will have to pay bill or amount. Okay, total amount, let's say total amount is a common attribute. So I will define inside the parent, right? Yeah, it provides clear model structure, which is easy to understand. Absolutely right. Absolutely correct. So total amount is one common attribute. So what could be the common behavior across all the customer, whether it is regular customer or privileged customer or occasional customers? What do all of them do in common? The behavior part. Total amount is the attribute. When we go with the behavior part, what is the common behavior that they do? What is the common behavior means that can be implemented in the form of methods. One such behavior is all the customer has to pay bill, right? They all have to pay bill. So that could be a common behavior, which I will define here. let it be void pays bill. So this is a common behavior. There will be some calculation or some statement. I'll just write a simple statement, pays bill. So this is common behavior. So this needs not be implemented by each and every child class. So like this, any attributes or because every customer will have an ID, will have a name, will have total amount, they pays bill. So all such things which are common will be defined inside the parent. There could be some additional attributes or behavior of child class that alone should be inside the child class, like say um, reward points. Let's say regular customer gets reward points. So reward points calculation will be specific attribute of regular customer. Occasional customers, there is no reward points. Okay, privileged customer might have some uh, other attributes which is specific to privileged one. Maybe it could be say discount. They get higher discounts, right? They get higher discounts. So that has to be defined only inside that class. And there should be a constructor. There should be a constructor also, and the structure of the constructor is specific. Just to save time, I'm auto generating the code. But if I don't recommend auto generation of such code if you are if somebody is new to Java, should type as much as possible, because that's what I did initial days. I write each and every word, okay, and that way I get clarity on what I'm typing and how it works, because then I started auto generation of code. When we teach students also, I never show them how the auto generation happens. Otherwise, they won't learn anything. They will forget the syntax, because they know this is how it gets auto generated. Once they are expert, they can do that. So this is the structure of the constructor of child class. So if you see, we don't have these attributes inside regular customer. From where did they came? That means this customer ID, name, okay, these are the attributes of parent. So we are not using total amount, so I'm commenting it out as of now. I just don't want to modify the constructor. So here it should start with the attributes of parent class first, followed by its own attribute. So the attributes of parent class should be initialized only by the parent, not inside the child. Okay, because we have a constructor in place of parent class where the initialization of all the attributes is done. So that's why we are passing these values to the parent class using a super call. So super is used specifically in inheritance. Okay, it's a call to the parent class, and it is used to pass values to the constructor of the parent class. So when this line number 40 executes, it goes to the constructor of parent and it passes customer ID and name, where the initialization of both the attributes is done. Now, from where the values will be received here, these values will be passed from the calling environment, which will later be passed to the parent class. So the child class can define its own attributes, okay, which is reward points. But anything which is specific to parent should go to the parent class for initialization. Hope we are good on this. Hope this is clear to all of you. In case any queries, please ask. So this is how we structure the constructor. Okay. So this is how we did, right? Reward points calculation can be a different behavior. You can define it here. I'm not writing the complete code. I'm just giving you the bigger picture of what exactly is inheritance and how it is implemented. Let's say calculate points or reward points. Okay, so some logic here that calculates the reward points. Okay, anyway, it's just the calculation of reward points. We just need to add new reward points to the existing one based on the number of purchase we did. It can be any logic. It depends from vendor to vendor. Some says with each 100 rupees spend, you get 1 rupee. Some says with each 100 rupees spend, you get 4 points. So based on any logic, we can do the calculation of reward points. Bank also provides reward points. Based on every 100 rupees you spend, there are some reward points that gets credited to your account. So it depends. There is no hard and fast rule to calculate the reward points. It can be any. So this is the structure. Now I can create multiple um, child classes, right? Before that, let us go to the main method. I'll keep the main method separate. I'll make it as class tester, where I will define the main method. Here inside the main method, whose object I should create? Should I create the object of the parent class, or I should create the object of child class, or I should create object of both? You have got three options. Child class, right? Yes. Child class is enough, right? Absolutely correct. Because through child class reference, we can access parent. So this is the benefit of inheritance. Okay. So here the point is, since we are implementing inheritance, so using child class reference, we can access both child as well as parent. But using parent class reference, we can't access child. Okay. So opposite is not true. Using parent class reference, you cannot access child. Means parent class object, you cannot create child. So yes, inheritance is a relationship. So here we'll create the regular customer object, right? Let's say C1 is equals to new regular customer object, and it is expecting some parameters: customer ID, name, and reward points. Okay, so customer ID we are auto generating. So I will remove it from here. Instead of that, we'll use total amount. Because customer ID we are auto generating, so there is no need to pass any value. So now, since we have changed the constructor of parent, we need to modify child class constructor also. In the same order, name and total amount. So the order also should match. The order in which the parameters are defined inside the constructor of parent, it should match with that. Name first and total amount next. All right, so we have modified this. So since customer ID is auto-generated, so we will not pass anything from the main method. We'll only pass name. Ideally, total amount should also be calculated, but to keep it simple, I will just pass the amount, directly the amount that the customer has to pay. So we have name, total amount, and reward points. Let's say the reward points assigned is 20. And using this C1, I can access calculate points. Using this C1, I can access pays bill. Pays bill is from the parent class. but we are accessing using child class, which is possible. This is in child class. So we can access other attributes also, like c1 dot get name. We can access total amount as well. Calculate points will not do anything because we have not written any logic. So this is how we can invoke both parent as well as child class objects. So like this, we can create any number of child classes. So again, I'm creating independent child class, which is privilege customer, extends customer. The moment you say extends customer, okay, so it becomes the child of parent. So similarly, if there is any specific attribute, we can define it inside privileged customer. I just created it. I am not defining any further attributes or methods. I hope this is clear. This is the structure, how we implement inheritance. All right. So this is a relationship, right? And Java supports 4 types of inheritance. You know it better. So one parent, one child is single inheritance, right? One parent, multiple child. Let us use a notepad. One parent, one child. What type of inheritance is this? Single, right? Then if you have one parent and multiple child, means more than one child. If you have one parent but multiple, one parent, multiple child. So I'm getting all the answers possible. Some are saying multiple, multi-level. So if I say one parent, one child, one grandchild, what you will say about this? This is multi-level. Yeah, last one is multi-level. So what about the second one? One parent but more than one child. Yes, it is. I'll just copy paste the name from the chat window. Hierarchical. Yes, Java does not support multiple inheritance. That's why I said there are 4 types of inheritance available. And then what about hybrid? What happens in hybrid? Multiple inheritance is a cheap using interface. No, that is not exactly true. Yes, hybrid is any combination of these 3. So here hybrid means there are multiple parents and multiple child from where a new child is created, and that becomes hybrid. So if a child is inheriting from multiple parents, multiple grandparents, it becomes hybrid. The most frequently used inheritance types are single or hierarchical. At times we go with multi-level also. Single, hierarchical, and sometimes multi-level also. So Java does not support multiple inheritance is the ultimate truth. Okay. So because when we say inheritance, there should be class involved. You can have multiple interfaces, but that's not exactly what multiple inheritance is. So we have also seen how we can make use of super to invoke the parent class constructor. We can, so this super is parameterized. If I don't pass anything in this super, so what will happen? Right now it is showing error because we have a parameterized, we don't have a default constructor. I have already given the answer. So super without parameters will call the default constructor of the parent class. And this is used only with inheritance. So right now, since we have parameterized constructor and we want to call it, so we will pass values according to the signature of parameterized constructor. Okay, so I think we should go for a break here before we proceed with the next topic. Shall we take a break here? So it's already 1.5 hours since we started.
Sir,
Yeah,
Sanjay sir.
yes, please.
Yes, sir. We have actually planned a schedule up to 1:30. So
Yes,
we take 5 minutes of break. That is better, I think so, sir.
not a problem.
Yes.
How about faculties? Is it okay with 5 minutes break? Let's make it as 15 minutes. Don't worry,
15 minutes.
we'll able to cover the topics. Not a
So
problem.
all the participants are requested to join again at 12:15. Is that okay, sir? Sanjay sir?
Yes. 12:15 will connect, and please stay connected with the bridge. You don't have to log out.
Yes.
I will be on mute. We'll join back at 12:15.
Yes, sir. We'll start the session at 12:15. Thank you, sir.